Good morning, Super Scholars! I hope everyone's having a wonderful Wednesday so far and that you are finding this video in our new slides presentation for the day. Hopefully this will help you all by putting everything in one place and making it a lot easier to find instead of having to go back and forth a lot of times throughout the day. Also, it gives you an easy way to look back on what you missed out on the other days in case you got behind. So what I want to do is go into our reading with holes and go back to Monday's lesson and talking about the setting that you all came up with. Okay, when I was reading some of your responses, I was blown away with the strategies I was seeing. Even though this is on a Go Formative, I still saw people restating. I saw people writing incomplete sentences and using all of their great transition words in their pieces. If you wrote something in a list, I completely understand where you're coming from, but make sure in the future that you're treating this like it's an extended response question, okay? Writing so that if somebody picked up the computer and was reading your response that had no idea what holes was, they would be able to understand what you were talking about, okay? All of these answers were wonderful with your explanations and your sensory words. One of the things I love to see was the vocabulary in your responses. Brindley, for example, used one of the words stifling in her response. And if we remember back to when we were in school, stifling was one of the words that was in the book that we introduced, and it meant that it was so hot she could hardly breathe. Okay, so Brindley used that in her example, and it was wonderful. Some other students used examples like instead of saying sad, they might say the word depressed or frustrated, or that it caused them anxiety when they were coming in. Those are really great ways to up your answer by just adding in some better vocabulary. So pat on the back for those of you that worked really hard to up your vocab in these. In the future, like today, when you're writing your responses, make sure that you use those strategies you know to restate, to give all of your details, and make sure that you're answering all parts of the question. Today, we are going to continue talking about the setting of the story, and this learning target is the same, where you're learning how to describe how the setting of the story affects the tone. If you think back to Monday, the tone was the feeling that you get when you're reading a story. So a lot of you said depressed, anxious, okay? So that's the tone of the book. Today, you'll know that you have it when you can describe how an alternate setting, and when I say the word alternate, I mean other setting, would affect this book and how it might change it. At the end of the day, you're going to be on a Go Formative and you're going to be writing about a different place that this story might take place. For example, a city, a beach, or the Arctic. If you're looking at these things, you need to think about, well, what are those settings? What would it be like in the Arctic? Or what would it be like in a big city? Or what would it be like at the beach? And how is that going to change holes and the different emotions that it might give us? That's your goal for reading today. So I am going to read to you chapters 11, 12, and I'm going to let you read 13 on your own today. Okay, so I'll read 11 and 12 and you can follow along with me. I want you to go ahead and take a minute to get your book out. You need to be on page 52, chapter 11. I'll wait while you get there. I'm going to go ahead and start reading. You can catch up to me if you're not already there. So make sure that you're on page 52 and it is the start of chapter 11. Stanley returned to his hole. It wasn't fair. Mr. Pendinsky even said his fossil was interesting. He slammed his shovel into the ground and pried up another piece of earth. After a while, he noticed X-Ray had come by and was watching him dig. "Hey, caveman, let me talk to you a second," X-Ray said. Stanley put down his shovel and stepped out of his hole. "Say, listen," said X-Ray. "If you find something else, give it to me, okay?" Stanley wasn't sure what to say. X-Ray was clearly the leader of the group, and Stanley didn't want to get on his bad side. "You're new here, right?" said X-Ray. "I've been here for almost a year, and I've never found anything. You know, my eyesight's not so good. No one knows this, but you know why my name's X-Ray?" Stanley shrugged one shoulder. "It's Pig Latin for Rex. That's all. I'm too blind to find anything." Stanley tried to remember how Pig Latin worked. "I mean," X-Ray went on, "why should you get a day off when you've only been here a couple of days? If anybody gets a day off, then it should be me. That's only fair, right?" "I guess," Stanley agreed. X-Ray smiled. "You're a good guy, caveman." Stanley picked up his shovel. The more he thought about it, the more he was glad that he agreed to let X-Ray have anything he might find. If he was going to survive at Camp Green Lake, it was far more important that X-Ray thinks he was a good guy than it was for him to get one day off. Besides, he didn't expect to find anything anyway. There probably wasn't anything of interest out there. And even if there was, he'd never been about what you would call lucky. He slammed his blade into the ground, then dumped out another shovel full of dirt. It was a little surprising, he thought, that X-Ray was the leader of the group, since he obviously wasn't the biggest or the toughest. In fact, except for Zero, X-Ray was the smallest. Armpit was the biggest. Zigzag may have been taller than Armpit, but that was only because of his neck. Yet Armpit and all the others seemed to be willing to do whatever X-Ray asked of them. As Stanley dug up another shovel full of dirt, it occurred to him that Armpit wasn't the biggest. He, the caveman, was bigger. He was glad they called him caveman. It meant they accepted him as a member of the group. He would have been glad if they had called him Barf Bag. It was really quite remarkable to him. At school, bullies like Derek Denny used to pick on him. Yet Derek Denny would be scared senseless by any of the boys here. As he dug his hole, Stanley thought about what it would be like if Derek Denny had to fight Armpit or Squid. Derek wouldn't stand a chance. He'd imagine what it would be like if he'd become good friends with all of them. And then for some reason, they all went to his school. And then Derek Denny tried to steal his notebook. "Just what do you think you're doing?" asked Squid, as he slammed his hands on Derek Denny's smug face. "Caveman's our friend," says Armpit, grabbing him by the shirt collar. Stanley played the scene over and over again in his mind, each time watching another boy from Group D beat up Derek Denny. It helped him dig his hole and ease his own suffering. Whatever pain he felt was being felt 10 times worse by Derek. Why do you think it's so important for Stanley to feel accepted and to get a nickname by the guys in the group? If you were in Stanley's shoes, how would you be feeling? I know that Camp Green Lake is supposed to be a place where these boys work out whatever they've got going on and become better, but I think that it's honestly teaching them a little bit about themselves at the same time. I'm going to keep reading chapter 12. Again, Stanley was the last one to finish digging. It was late afternoon when he dragged himself back to the compound. This time, he would have accepted a ride on the truck if it was offered. When he got to the tent, he found Mr. Pendinsky and the other boys sitting in a circle on the ground. "Welcome, Stanley," said Mr. Pendinsky. "Hey, caveman, you got your hole dug?" asked Magnet. He nodded. He managed to nod. You spit in it? Asked Squid. He nodded again. You're right, he said to X-Ray. The second hole's the hardest. X-Ray shook his head. The third hole's the hardest, he said. Come on, join our circle, said Mr. Pendinsky. Stanley plopped down between Squid and Magnet. He needed to rest up before taking a shower. We've been discussing what we want to do with our lives, said Mr. Pendinsky. We're not going to be at Camp Green Lake forever. We need to prepare for the day we leave here and join the rest of society. Hey, that's great, Mom, said Magnet. They're going to finally let you out of here? The other boys laughed. Okay, Jose, said Mr. Pendinsky. What do you want to do with your life? I don't know, said Magnet. You need to think about that, said Mr. Pendinsky. It's important to have goals. Otherwise, you're going to end up right back in jail. What do you like to do? I don't know, said Magnet. You must like something, said Mr. Pendinsky. I like animals, said Magnet. Good, said Mr. Pendinsky. Does anyone know of any jobs that involve animals? Veterinarian, said Armpit. That's right, said Mr. Pendinsky. He could work in a zoo, said Zigzag. He belongs in the zoo, said Squid, and he and X-Ray laughed. How about you, Stanley? Any ideas for Jose? Stanley sighed. Animal trainer? He said. Like the circus or the movies or something like that. Any of those jobs sound good to you, Jose? Asked Mr. Pendinsky. Yeah, I like what Caveman said about training animals for the movies. I think that would be fun to train monkeys. X-Ray laughed. Don't laugh, Rex, said Mr. Pendinsky. We don't laugh at people's dreams. Someone is going to have to train the monkeys for the movies. Who are you kidding, Mom? Asked X-Ray. Magnet's never going to be a monkey trainer. You don't know that, said Mr. Pendinsky. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Nothing in life is easy, but that's no reason to give up. You'll be surprised at what you can accomplish if you set your mind to it. After all, you only have one life, so you should try to make the most of it. Stanley tried to figure out what he'd say if Mr. Pendinsky asked him what he wanted to do with his life. He used to think he wanted to work for the FBI, but this didn't seem like the appropriate place to mention that. So far, you've all done a pretty good job at messing up your lives, said Mr. Pendinsky. I know you think you're cool, he looked at Stanley. So you're caveman now, huh? You like digging holes, caveman? Stanley didn't know what to say. Well, let me tell you something, caveman. You're here on the account of one person. If it wasn't for that person, you wouldn't be here digging holes in the hot sun. You know who that person is? My no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. The boys howled with laughter. Even Zero smiled. It was the first time Stanley had ever seen Zero smile. He usually had such an angry expression on his face. Now he had such a huge smile, it almost seemed too big for his face, like the smile on a jack-o'-lantern. No, said Mr. Pendinsky, that person is you, Stanley. You're the reason you are here. You're responsible for yourself. You messed up your life, and it's up for you to fix it. No one else is going to do it for you, any of you. Mr. Pendinsky looked from one boy to the other. You're all special in your own way, he said. You've all got something to offer. You have to think about what you want to do, then do it. Even you, Zero. You're not completely worthless. The smile was now gone from Zero's face. What do you want to do with your life? Mr. Pendinsky asked him. Zero's mouth was shut tight, and he glared at Mr. Pendinsky. His dark eyes seemed to expand. What about it, Zero? Asked Mr. Pendinsky. What do you like to do? I like to dig holes. Why do you think Zero got so upset? That this huge megawatt smile on his face completely gone in an instant. What do you think would have caused that? I want for you to think about Mr. Pendinsky and the talk that he's giving some of the boys. I feel like I might have given some of that talk sometimes, telling you all how you're responsible for your actions and you are the one that's in charge of your life. And he's giving some really great advice, but I think some of the things he said went about it in the wrong way. I think maybe we'll need to talk about how that translated to 0. Okay. I want to leave you to read chapter 13 on your own. Once you're finished reading today, I want for you to go in and do the go formative that we talked about, and that's with thinking about the setting of holes. And if it was set in somewhere different, like the Arctic, the beach, or the city, how this book would be different. Would they be digging holes? Would they be hot? Would it be sad and depressing? How would that different setting change things? You don't have to pick all 3. You only need to pick 1. When you go in and write your response, make sure that you use the strategies we talked about. Restate the question. Write in full sentences. Use your academic vocabulary that you have. Okay? Instead of saying hot, how could you describe it in a different way? Okay? When you go through these, I want for you to make sure that you are typing and using periods in your sentence formatting, okay? Don't just have it be one big run-on. All right, I can't wait to see what you all write. Make sure that you submit it through your formative and share it with your teachers. Hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, and we'll see you tomorrow.